The rain never really stopped in Seattle. It just changed its shape. Mist in the morning, drizzle in the evening, and thin, needling sheets after midnight. For Naomi Torres, it was more than weather. It was background noise, the sound of life continuing whether she kept up or not. At 2:07 a.m., she pulled another tray of croissants from the oven. Steam rose like breath from their golden layers. The bakery was small, only 3 tables, 1 flickering neon sign, and a radio that hadn't worked right since 2016. But it was hers, or at least it had been. Rent was due in 9 days. Her ex-husband hadn't called in 13 months. Her son, Eli, was 9, old enough to notice the worry in her face, young enough to think pancakes could fix anything. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and looked out the front window. The rain was relentless, smearing the reflection of the city into soft watercolor. At this hour, only 2 kinds of people walked the streets, the lost and the lonely. She was both. Some nights, the bell above the door chimed. Naomi turned, startled. The man who stepped in looked like he belonged anywhere but here. Expensive coat, tired eyes, phone in hand. "Sorry," he said, glancing around. "Didn't realize you were still open." She smiled automatically. Moonrise Bakery never sleeps. "What can I get you?" He scanned the glass display, though most of it was empty. "Whatever's fresh." She slid a croissant onto a napkin. "They all are. I don't bake old bread." He gave a small laugh, more out of surprise than humor. "Fair enough." She poured him coffee from the pot that had been sitting for hours. He didn't complain. He sat at the corner table, loosened his tie, and stared out the window like he was waiting for the rain to apologize. Naomi returned to the counter, pretending to clean while watching him. He looked young for someone so worn, early 30s, maybe. Sharp face softened by exhaustion. The kind of man who forgot to eat unless someone reminded him, when he caught her looking. She blushed and busied herself with stacking trays. He finished half the croissant, then stood, pulling out his wallet. "How much?" $5.50, she said. He handed her a 20. "Keep the change." She shook her head. "You're already overpaying for sugar and butter." He smiled barely. "Then call it a donation." "For what?" He hesitated. For still being open after he left. She found the 20 still on the counter, weighted under his coffee cup. Under it, on a napkin, he had written a single word. "Thanks." She turned it over in her hand, feeling the imprint of the pen. People didn't write thanks anymore. They texted it, abbreviated it, sent it as a but this was ink. Real. She tucked the napkin into the register drawer and went back to kneading dough by the time the rain stopped. The sky was turning pale grey. The smell of yeast and butter filled the shop, warm and familiar. She turned off the oven, stretched her sore shoulders, and checked her phone. 2 missed calls from Eli's school. Her stomach sank. When she called back, the secretary's voice was apologetic. "He's fine, Miss Torres. Just fell asleep during class again. Naomi rubbed her eyes. "I'll talk to him." She hung up and sat on the flour-dusted stool. Fell asleep again. Because she worked nights and slept through mornings. Because he waited for her breakfast that never came on time. Because even when she was home, she was somewhere else. She glanced at the napkin still sitting beside the register. "Thanks," it said. Simple, kind. She exhaled. Maybe that was enough to get through another night. At 2:10 a.m. the next morning, the door chimed again. Same man, same coat, same tired eyes. Only this time, he smiled first. "Do you always open this late?" he asked. She wiped her hands. "Do you always eat pastries in the middle of the night?" "Only when I forget dinner," he said. "Must happen a lot." He gave a small, self-deprecating grin. "You'd be surprised." She poured him coffee without asking. He sat in the same chair, and for the first time in months, the bakery didn't feel empty. The rain had returned by the third night. Seattle's kind of rain didn't fall. It lingered, soft and endless, whispering against the windows like a language only the lonely could understand. Naomi wiped the counter again, though it didn't need it when the bell above the door chimed. Same hour, same man. He stepped in, shaking droplets from his coat, eyes tired but kind. "I was starting to think you only existed after 2 a.m., she teased. He smiled faintly. "You're not far off." This time, she learned his name. Liam Hartman. He said it casually, like it wasn't the kind of name that showed up in magazines and business headlines. She didn't know yet that the tower across the street, all glass and light, had his name on its top floor. He ordered the same thing, 1 croissant, 1 black coffee. They fell into easy silence, her cleaning trays, him reading something on his phone. At one point he asked, "How long have you been running this place?" 8 years, she said. 7 good, 1 not so much. What happened? She shrugged. Pandemic. Rent, hike, life. He nodded, like he understood more than he wanted to say. "You bake alone." "Most nights. My son helps before school, but he's 9. Mostly eats the profits." That made him smile. "Sounds like a good partner." "He is," she said softly. "Just doesn't know it yet." They started talking more after that. Little things. He'd ask about the dough she was needing, why it needed to rest, how she knew when it was ready. She'd ask about his job, but he always gave short answers. "Finance," he said once. "Mostly numbers." "Numbers big enough to keep you up this late?" she asked. He smiled, but there was a shadow behind it. "Sometimes numbers keep you up because they don't add up anymore." She didn't press. At 3 a.m., he left as always. But that night, as he opened the door, he turned back. "You ever think about moving?" he asked. "Getting a bigger place?" Naomi laughed. "With what money?" "I wasn't offering," he said quickly, then flushed. "I just mean, you deserve one." She tilted her head. "You're the first person to say that in a long time." "Then I'm overdue," he said quietly. "Good night, Naomi." She didn't realize until later that she'd never told him her name by morning. Her phone buzzed with a message from the bakery's landlord. Another reminder about overdue rent. She stared at the total, her chest tightening. The numbers looked like a foreign language. When Eli came down for breakfast, she forced a smile. "Hey, champ. Pancakes or toast?" "Toast," he said, yawning. "You coming to the science fair tomorrow?" Her smile faltered. "That's tomorrow," he nodded. "Don't worry, you can bring muffins." She laughed weakly. "I'll be there, promise." That night, Liam didn't come. The bell never rang. The rain fell harder, the kind that blurred everything outside into grey motion. Naomi worked anyway, hands busy, mind racing. She told herself she didn't care. He was just a customer, just another face in the endless night. Still, when she locked up at 4 a.m., She found herself glancing toward the glass tower across the street. The top floor was still lit. A man stood there, silhouetted against the window, looking down at the city. He didn't wave, but she knew it was him. The next night, he returned. He looked more tired than before, the kind of tired that lived in the eyes, not the body. Long day. She asked, handing him his coffee. Long week. Try a croissant. It's cheaper than therapy. He laughed, and she caught it, that rare, unguarded sound that broke through the polished calm. For the first time since she opened the bakery, Naomi realized she wasn't the only one who needed this place to keep breathing. The following week began with sirens. Not the kind that screamed for help, but the quiet orange kind, eviction notice taped to the door of the dry cleaner 2 blocks down. Then the pawn shop, then the bookstore next door. Naomi tried not to look when she walked to the dumpster that morning, but the yellow papers fluttered in the wind like warnings by midnight. The rain had started again, and the bakery smelled like cinnamon and worry. Eli was asleep in the back, curled on the old couch under his blanket. Naomi needed dough, hands steady though her chest wasn't. Her rent deadline had slipped by 2 days ago. No call, no knock. Not yet. When the bell chimed, she nearly dropped the rolling pin. Liam stepped in, umbrella dripping, coat unbuttoned. He looked exhausted, but not from work. Something heavier. You're still open, he said softly. Like I said, she smiled. Moonrise never sleeps. He sat in his usual seat. She poured his coffee, handed him a croissant, still warm. For a while, they didn't speak. The radio hummed quietly from the corner, static fading in and out of a jazz station. Finally, he said, "They're tearing down the block." I know. She didn't look up. I didn't, he admitted. Not until today. The city sent the notice last week. Redevelopment, new complex, mixed retail. She laughed dryly. Fancy words for bulldozers. He frowned. I didn't want this. You don't have to want it, she said. You just have to own the company that's doing it. The words hung there, sharp and small, like glass between them. Liam's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It never is, right? Naomi wiped her hands on her apron. For people like me, it's just simple math. Rent goes up. Lights go out. He stood, frustrated. Naomi, no, she said quietly, cutting him off. You don't get to fix this with money. He exhaled. That's not what I'm trying to do. Then what are you trying to do? He didn't answer. The silence stretched, filled only by the rain tapping the window and the hum of the ovens. Finally, he said, I come here because it feels human. Because I forget things when I'm here. Forget that I built something I don't even like living in. Naomi stared at him, the sincerity in his voice, the cracks he never showed anyone. For a moment, she saw not the man from the tower, but someone trying desperately to climb back down. She said softly, You could have just said you liked the bread. He laughed, weak but real. That too. Later, when he left, he paused at the door. Can I help? Not with money, with people. The city, the permits, whatever. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know if I can trust you. He nodded slowly. Then let me earn it. After he was gone, she locked the door and leaned against it. The ovens still glowed behind her. The smell of fresh bread wrapping around her like warmth she didn't deserve. She whispered to herself, You can't bake your way out of this one. But she would try. By dawn, the rain had stopped. She packed Eli's lunch and walked him to the bus stop, the streets slick with light. When he asked if the bakery would still be there by Christmas, she smiled and lied, of course. That afternoon, she found a folder slipped under the door. No name, just a single sheet inside. City paperwork, permit extensions, temporary zoning delay dot at the bottom. One signature, L. Hartman. She sat down hard on the floor, the paper trembling in her hands. For the first time in a long while, she cried. Not because she was saved, but because someone had decided she was worth saving. It started with a smell. Not the good kind, not the sweet, buttery perfume that filled Moonrise Bakery most nights. This was bitter, sharp, electric, the smell of something burning that shouldn't be. Naomi looked up from the counter, frowning. The clock on the wall blinked, 1:38 a.m. She was alone. The ovens were off. The dough was resting. Everything should have been still. Then came the sound, faint popping, like someone snapping twigs. She stepped outside, and the alley glowed orange. The dry cleaner 2 doors down was on fire. At first it was small, a trash bin, maybe. Then, as the wind picked up, the flames climbed the side wall, licking the windows, spreading fast. Naomi froze for half a heartbeat before instinct took over. She ran back inside, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and pulled the alarm. The noise shattered the silence of the street. The sprinklers in the bakery kicked in, cold water raining over the counters, soaking everything. Dough, flour, cash register, all of it hissed and melted into chaos. God Delay, she gasped. He wasn't there, she reminded herself. He was safe, asleep at home. Still, her hands shook. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the street was a flood of red lights and steam. Neighbors leaned out of windows, filming. Someone shouted her name. And through the flashing chaos, she saw him Liam. No coat, no umbrella, just rain and smoke on his face as he pushed through the crowd. Naomi, he shouted, voice cutting through the sirens. She turned, soaked, shaking, covered in ash. I'm fine, she yelled back, though her voice broke halfway. He reached her in 2 strides, grabbed her shoulders. You're not fine, he said. Come on. She tried to push him away. I can't leave it my ovens. They'll handle it, he said, pulling her back as another window cracked under the heat. You can't fight this. For a second, she resisted. Then her knees buckled, and he caught her. Hours later, the flames were out. The bakery was blackened, but still standing, mostly. The sign had melted at one corner. The inside smelled of wet soot and sugar. Naomi stood across the street, wrapped in a blanket, watching the firefighters finish their work. Liam was beside her, hands jammed in his pockets, face streaked with ash. He looked at her like she was something fragile that refused to break. She whispered, "It's gone." He shook his head. Not gone. Just hurt. She laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. He turned to her. You have insurance. Expired last month. Her voice was flat, but the weight behind it was enough. He ran a hand through his hair. I can help, don't, she said. Not now. Not like that. I'm not offering charity. Then what are you offering, Liam? She snapped. You don't even know me. He held her gaze. I think I do. The silence between them burned hotter than the fire had. Rain started again, thin and cold. She looked down, realizing her hands were still shaking. He reached out, gently closing his fingers around hers. Come with me, he said quietly. You can't stay here tonight. She hesitated, then nodded. Just until morning. He smiled, tired, relieved. Until morning, they drove in silence. The city blurred past, streetlights reflected in puddles, smoke rising behind them. When they reached the glass tower, Naomi stared up at it, water dripping from her hair. "You live here?" "Top floor," he said, almost embarrassed. "Company perk." Inside, the air smelled like cedar and quiet. The elevator ride was silent, the kind of silence that pressed on the ribs. When the doors opened, she saw everything at once. Wide windows, city lights stretching forever, the rain painting soft silver streaks across the glass. It felt like another planet. He gave her a towel and a sweatshirt, then poured coffee from a sleek machine that looked like it cost more than her oven. "Sorry about the mess," he said. She looked around. "Your definition of mess is adorable." He smiled faintly, then grew serious. "I'm glad you're okay." She nodded, wrapping her hands around the cup. "I almost wasn't." The rain beat against the windows, steady, endless. The city pulsed below, alive and indifferent. For the first time that night, Naomi let herself breathe by dawn. She stood by the glass wall, looking out at the streets below, the same streets where she baked, laughed, fought, and now lost so much. Liam joined her quietly, holding 2 mugs. He offered her one. She took it, eyes still on the horizon. "I don't know what comes next." "Then we'll figure it out," he said. Together, she turned toward him, the city light catching her face. For the first time in months, maybe years, she let someone else's hope touch hers. Outside, the first morning train cut through the rain, a soft, distant hum that sounded like beginning. The kitchen on the 42nd floor didn't smell like home. It smelled like glass, chrome, and money, too clean, too bright, too still. Naomi stood in the middle of it, holding a bag of flour like an anchor, feeling wildly out of place. Liam leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from the rain. "You sure you're okay working here?" She forced a half smile. "You offered a kitchen, not a confession booth." He laughed softly. "Fair enough." But when she turned away to find the mixing bowls, her hands trembled. Everything about this place felt temporary. The borrowed shirt on her back, the shiny countertops that reflected every movement, the city stretching beneath her feet like it belonged to someone else. The bakery, even burned and broken, had been hers. This was someone else's air dot. By noon, she had baked 3 loaves of bread, 2 trays of muffins, and a dozen croissants, just to keep her hands busy, just to silence the noise inside her head. Liam worked in the adjoining office, on endless video calls. She could hear the low hum of his voice through the glass wall, calm and measured, as if nothing had happened. At one point he stepped in, loosening his tie. "You've been baking for 5 hours. It helps me think," she said, "about everything I lost." He paused. "You didn't lose yourself, Naomi." She didn't answer. She just kept kneading, the rhythm steady, relentless. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers, Liam joined her by the counter. The smell of fresh bread filled the apartment, softening the sterile edges of it. "You know," he said, "my mom used to bake when my dad left. Every Sunday, the house smelled like yeast and stubbornness." Naomi looked up. "That a recipe?" He smiled faintly. "More like survival." She tore a piece of bread, handed it to him. "Then here's to survival." He took it, bit in, closed his eyes. God, this is better than any restaurant in this city. She smirked. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, he said. Just impressed. Her heart skipped, not at the compliment, but at the way he said it, quiet and honest. Like it wasn't about bread at all. Later, when Eli arrived, Liam had sent a car for him after school. The boy stared at the apartment in awe. Whoa, this is like a spaceship, Eli said. Liam grinned. No aliens here, I promise. Eli ran straight to the window, pressing his hands against the glass. You can see everything from up here. Naomi watched her son's reflection in the glass, small, bright, alive, and something inside her unclenched. For the first time since the fire, Eli was smiling. Liam caught her looking. You okay? Yeah, she said quietly. He needed this. So did you, he said. That night, after Eli fell asleep on the couch, Naomi found herself standing by the window again. The city glittered below, 1,000 tiny lights blinking like steady heartbeats. Liam walked over, to mugs in hand. Hot chocolate, he said. Don't tell my investors I can make something that isn't profit. She laughed softly. Your secret's safe. He leaned on the railing beside her. You ever think about opening again? She sighed. Every minute, you could. I could, don't, she cut in. Don't offer to fix it. I wasn't, he said gently. I was offering to help you fix it. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the sincerity there, not pity, not power. Just a man trying to do something right for once. I don't even know where to start, she whispered. He smiled. Flour, sugar, hope. When she laughed, it startled her. The sound felt alive again. He reached for the mug in her hands, his fingers brushing hers. You'll start again, he said quietly. And this time, you won't do it alone. Outside, the rain began again, soft, persistent, endless. But somehow, it didn't sound sad this time. It sounded like rhythm, like something beginning to rise. The next morning, Naomi woke up to the sound of Eli laughing. It was a small, genuine sound, one she hadn't heard in weeks. She stepped into the kitchen to find Liam and Eli at the marble counter, covered in flour. You're supposed to whisk, not throw it, Liam was saying. I am whisking. Eli grinned, flour streaked across his cheek like war paint. Naomi leaned against the doorway, smiling. You to look dangerous. Liam looked up. We're making pancakes. Or something pretending to be. More like dough armor, she teased. He laughed, and for a fleeting second, it felt absurdly normal, like they were a family. And that was what scared her most. After breakfast, Liam walked her to the study. The room overlooked downtown, sunlight spilling through the windows like forgiveness. On the desk was a thin folder, neatly labeled, Moonrise Project. Naomi frowned. What's this? A proposal, he said. Don't panic, not the corporate kind. I had my people run some numbers. The lot's still zoned for small business. If we rebuild, we can secure funding through the community redevelopment program. She echoed. He nodded. You, me, and whoever you trust. You run it. I'll invest, quietly. She looked at him, stunned. You want a partner on a bakery? I want a partner on your bakery, he said softly. Seattle doesn't need another luxury tower. It needs places that smell like bread and second chances. Naomi's throat tightened. You're serious, as a heart attack, he said, then smiled. Too soon. she laughed, the sound trembling between fear and wonder. Liam, you don't even bake. Good, that means I won't get in the way. Over the next few days, the plan began to breathe. Naomi spent hours sketching layouts on scrap paper, rediscovering the part of herself that dreamed in measurements and ovens. Liam set up meetings with contractors and city planners, quietly moving mountains behind the scenes. They'd meet late at night over tea and spreadsheets. Her hair messy, his tie loosened, both pretending not to notice how much they enjoyed these quiet hours. One evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, Eli wandered in holding a sketch pad. Look, he said proudly. It's the new bakery. Naomi took the drawing, a bright little building with smiling stick figures behind the counter. That's beautiful, honey. That's you, Eli said, pointing. And that's me. And that's Mr. Liam. Liam blinked. Mr. Liam, yeah, you're holding bread. You help, Mom, Naomi smiled awkwardly. He might, actually. Eli grinned. Then it's real. Liam glanced at Naomi, voice soft. Guess we're official, then. She rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide her smile. A few days later, reality hit. A photo appeared online. Naomi and Liam leaving a city building together. The headline was brutal. Tech billionaire's mystery woman, nighttime baker or new flame. By evening, her phone was full of messages from old neighbors, friends, even her ex-husband's mother. She felt the walls close in. Liam found her sitting on the couch, the article glowing on her phone screen. I'm so sorry, he said immediately. I didn't. I told you this would happen, she whispered. You live in the sky, Liam. I live on the ground. People like you don't date people like me. They collect them, he winced. Is that what you think this is? She looked at him, tears trembling but on. I don't know. I want to believe you. But I've been rescued before, and it always came with a price. He sat down across from her, eyes steady. Then name the price. Naomi, tell me what makes it real. Time, she said. Let me rebuild. Let me stand on my own first. He nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. You mean that? Yeah, he smiled faintly. I'll even stay out of the kitchen for a week. She laughed despite herself, shaking her head. You'll die of boredom. Then I'll haunt your next bakery, he said softly. She met his eyes, and this time, she didn't look away. A week later, she signed the first lease agreement under Moonrise, rebuilt. Liam didn't attend the meeting. He just sent flowers, white lilies, and one small note. You were always the foundation. L. Naomi placed the note in her recipe book, next to her mother's old handwriting. Then she picked up her rolling pin, dusted the counter, and whispered to herself, flour, sugar, hope. The city outside buzzed and hummed and didn't care, but the scent of something new began to rise again. The scent of bread returned before the walls were even finished. Naomi stood inside the half-painted bakery, paint smudged on her arms, flour dust in her hair, watching sunlight spill through the front windows. The new Moonrise wasn't big, but it breathed soft blue walls, reclaimed wood counters, one brick oven that hummed like a heartbeat. This is it, she whispered to herself. We're home again. Eli ran past her, chasing his reflection on the glass door. Can we put the sign back up today, Mom? Not yet, sweetheart. Tomorrow, tomorrow. It tasted sweet, dangerous, and alive by afternoon. Liam stopped by in jeans for once, sleeves rolled up. 2 coffees in hand. "You're early," Naomi said. Smiling, "I missed the smell," he admitted. "And the chaos." "Careful," she teased. "I might make you work the register." He grinned. "Deal. I'm terrible with cash, but great with compliments." She rolled her eyes, but the warmth stayed. He walked through the space slowly, tracing the air like he was memorizing it. "You did this," he said softly. "Without me, you helped." "No," he said, turning toward her. "You rebuilt yourself. I just happened to witness it." Before she could reply, Eli called from the back, "Mum." "The shelf's wobbly." She sighed. "See, reality always interrupts." "Reality has good timing," Liam said. That evening, as Naomi locked up, she caught her reflection in the window, tired, paint-streaked, but alive. It had been months since she'd looked at herself without flinching. She smiled faintly. The woman staring back wasn't broken anymore, just human. 2 days later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Moonrise Bakery drew a small crowd. Neighbors, local press, old customers. The air smelled of sugar, yeast, and anticipation. Naomi stood behind the counter, Eli by her side, scissors in hand. Liam stood near the door, watching quietly. Not the CEO today, just a man proud of something fragile and real. When the ribbon fell, applause filled the room. Naomi blinked hard to keep from crying. Eli hugged her waist. "We did it, Mum." "We did," she whispered. Together, Liam caught her eye and mouthed congratulations. For a moment, she let herself believe in happily ever after. It didn't last that evening. When the bakery closed and the last customer left, Naomi sent Eli out back to throw away the trash. Minutes later, she heard the screech of tires. The sound froze her blood. She dropped the tray she was holding and bolted through the back door. A delivery van had turned too sharply at the corner. Eli lay on the wet asphalt, small, still, blood trickling from his forehead. "Eli!" She screamed, running to him, voice raw and shaking. He stirred faintly, whispering, "Mum." Her hands shook as she called 911, voice breaking. The world narrowed to sirens and the smell of rain and metal at the hospital. Everything blurred, bright lights, nurses' questions she couldn't process. Eli had a mild concussion and a broken arm. "He'll be okay," the doctor said. "He's a tough kid." Naomi sat beside his bed, gripping his hand. She couldn't stop replaying it, his small body on the street, the sound of the impact, her helpless scream. Then a shadow fell across the room. Liam. He didn't say anything at first, just knelt beside her and held her shaking hands. She didn't resist. "I got here as soon as I heard," he whispered. "Is he?" "He's okay," she said, voice cracking. "He's okay." He exhaled hard, closing his eyes in relief. Thank God. Hours later, after Eli drifted to sleep, Naomi walked out into the hospital corridor. Her clothes smelled of antiseptic and fear. Liam followed quietly. "You should rest." She shook her head. "I can't." "Naomi," she turned on him suddenly, tears in her eyes. "You don't understand. Every time I build something, something else falls apart. I can't," her voice broke. "I can't lose him." He took a step closer. "You won't. How can you be sure?" "Because I'm not going anywhere this time," he said simply. She stared at him, and in his eyes she saw the same fear, the same desperate hope. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. And he held her not as a savior, but as someone just as breakable. but somewhere across the city, in an office still glowing with midnight light, Liam's phone buzzed on his desk. A message from his board. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Stock crash. Project under investigation. He didn't see it yet. Not tonight. Tonight, there was only the sound of a mother breathing beside her son, and a man silently deciding what he would sacrifice when dawn came. The first thing Naomi noticed when Liam walked into the hospital the next morning wasn't the suit, it was the silence. He looked like someone who'd spent the night fighting ghosts and losing. His tie was loosened, his eyes hollow. His phone buzzed endlessly, and each time he ignored it. "How's Eli?" he asked, voice low. "Sleeping," Naomi said. "They'll discharge him tomorrow." He nodded, relief flickering across his face, but it didn't stay. Something heavier pressed on him. She could feel it. "Liam," she said softly, "what's going on?" He hesitated. "It's complicated. Try me," he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "There's an investigation. One of my board members pushed through a zoning deal tied to the redevelopment project, the same one your bakery was in. Someone leaked that I funded it to raise property values before the rebuild." Her stomach dropped. "That's not true, is it?" "No," he said quickly. "I didn't know, but it doesn't matter. Public perception's a wildfire once it starts. You can't control where it burns." She looked at him, voice shaking. "And I'm the match." He froze. "Naomi." "No." But she stepped back. "You helped me rebuild. You signed papers. You moved money. To them, it looks like you were hiding something, and I was part of it." He reached for her hand. "I'll fix it." "Stop saying that," she snapped. "You can't fix everything. You can't buy silence, or forgiveness, or time. I'm not trying to buy anything. Yes, you are." Her voice cracked. "You think if you just throw yourself between me and the fire, no one else gets burned. But you're the one carrying the matches, Liam." He flinched. For a second, neither spoke. The hospital room felt too small, the air too thin. Finally, she whispered, "I need space." He nodded, slowly. "If that's what you want, it's what I need." Naomi spent the next days at home, watching Eli heal. His arm in a sling, his laughter soft but returning. But her mind kept circling back to the papers, the headlines. The way Liam had looked like a man trapped between guilt and duty. The bakery reopened quietly a week later. Fewer customers came, but the smell of bread still filled the street. It was enough. It had to be. One evening, while sweeping near closing, she looked up and saw him outside. Liam, no suit this time. Just jeans, raincoat, exhaustion. He hesitated before entering. Still open. For a few minutes. He walked in, looked around the new space, the framed photo of Eli on the shelf, the soft light from the oven. "This place survived the fire better than I did," he said. She kept sweeping. "You'll survive this too." He smiled faintly. "You sound like you believe it." "I have to," she said. "For him?" "For me." He watched her, then said quietly, "The board voted me out today." Her broom stilled midair. "What?" "I resigned before they could." "It's over." Naomi blinked, stunned. "You gave up everything." He shook his head. "Not everything. Just what didn't matter anymore." The silence stretched. The only sound was the oven timer, soft and steady. Naomi turned back to the counter, trying to steady her hands. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Maybe." "Breathe," he said, Figure out who I am when I'm not fixing everyone else's mess. She turned to face him. You could start here. I still need help painting the back wall. He laughed, tired, real. That I can do. They stood there, side by side again, not saying much, just existing in the same small room while the smell of bread filled the air. Something fragile had cracked between them, but something truer had begun to form underneath. Later that night, after he left, Naomi sat on the counter, sipping coffee, staring at the half-finished mural Eli had painted bright colors, crooked sun, a little house that looked suspiciously like moonrise. She whispered to the empty room, "You can lose everything twice and still be alive." Her phone buzzed, a message from Liam, "I'll stop by tomorrow." No suits, no headlines. Just a paintbrush. She smiled, small but genuine. Then she set down the cup and turned off the lights. Outside, the city glowed, quiet and soft, and for once, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something to break. Liam showed up the next morning at 6 a.m., no driver, no suit. Just a paint-stained hoodie and a box of donuts he'd clearly bought from somewhere else. Naomi raised an eyebrow when he stepped in. "You're late." He looked at the clock. "It's 6:01, in bakery time. That's yesterday," she said, but the corner of her mouth lifted. He smiled, relief flickering in his eyes like a candle finding oxygen. "So, where do you want me?" She handed him a brush. "Start with the back wall. Try not to fall off the ladder. I don't have workers' comp." He grinned. "Noted." They painted in silence for a while. The smell of fresh bread mingled with drying paint. Sunlight crawled across the counter, and the city outside started to wake. Eli arrived an hour later, still in pajamas, hair sticking up like he'd wrestled the pillow and lost. He froze when he saw Liam on the ladder. "Mr. Liam, you're painting." "Trying to," Liam said, dabbing a blob of yellow on the wall. Eli giggled. "That's not yellow. That's mustard." Naomi hid a smile. "He's learning." Eli ran up beside him. "I can help." Within minutes, the wall looked like an abstract sunset, streaks of orange, gold, and messy laughter. Naomi stood back, brush in hand, and realized her bakery finally sounded alive again around noon. When Eli left for a playdate, Naomi brewed coffee for two and sat beside Liam at the counter. They were both covered in paint, hands stained, faces tired but peaceful. "Feels different in here," he said quietly. "It does. Like it belongs to the world again," he added. She nodded. "Maybe that's what I wanted all along. Not to own it, but to let it breathe." He watched her for a long moment. "You ever regret rebuilding?" She shook her head. "I regret waiting this long to believe I could." The afternoon rush came, small but steady. A few regulars, curious neighbors, a couple of tourists who'd read about the fire bakery that refused to die. Naomi took orders, smiled, wiped counters. Liam worked quietly beside her, serving coffee, clumsy but earnest. At one point, an older woman leaned toward Naomi and whispered, "Your husband's very sweet." Naomi froze mid-pour. "He's not," but Liam glanced over and said softly, "I'll take the compliment." Naomi rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "You're impossible." "Persistent," he corrected. "Same thing," she muttered, cheeks warming later that night after closing. They sat outside the bakery on the curb, watching the last bus rumble by. Naomi handed him a loaf, still warm. "Your wages." He took it, smiling. "You pay better than Wall Street." That's because I can't afford to fire anyone. He tore off a piece of bread, handed half to her. They ate in silence, crumbs falling between them, the street lamps humming softly above. Finally, he said, "You know what the hardest part of leaving the company was?" She shook her head. "Not the money. Not the headlines. It was realizing I didn't know what to do with my hands anymore." She looked down at his palms, now dusted in flour and paint instead of power. "You figured it out." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you did." When the night air turned cold, Naomi stood. "Come on, you can crash on the couch upstairs. Eli won't mind." He looked up, half surprised. "You sure?" She nodded. "You painted half my wall. That earns you one night's rent." He followed her inside, the bakery dark except for the soft glow of the ovens cooling down. At the stairs, she turned back. "Liam, yeah." "Thanks," she said simply. "For showing up," he smiled. "I've got nowhere else I'd rather be." And as they climbed the stairs, the quiet between them no longer felt heavy. It felt like bread rising, slow, certain, alive. The next morning smelled like cinnamon and rain. Naomi woke before sunrise, the kind of grey-blue hour when the city still whispered instead of shouted. She tiptoed downstairs, careful not to wake Eli or Liam. The ovens hummed softly. She began her ritual. Flour, water, yeast. Knead, fold, wait. There was peace in the rhythm, the kind that only came when her hands moved faster than her thoughts. But peace never lasted long. The bell above the bakery door jingled. Naomi looked up, startled. It was too early for customers. And then she froze. Standing there, damp from the drizzle, was David Eli's father, the man she hadn't seen in nearly 6 years. "Naomi," he said quietly, voice low and familiar. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Every memory she'd tried to bury stirred awake. The fights, the long nights, the silence that had killed more than words ever could. She wiped her hands on her apron. "What are you doing here?" He took a hesitant step forward. "I heard about the fire. About you rebuilding. I wanted to see it." "You could have called," she said flatly. "I didn't think you'd answer. You're right." The air between them thickened. Outside, the rain tapped against the glass, slow and steady. Finally, he said, "How's Eli?" "He's fine. He has a life. A school, a future. Everything you left him to build without you." He winced. "I deserve that." "Yes," she said. "You do." The stairs creaked behind her. Liam appeared, half asleep, in his t-shirt and paint-splattered sweatpants. He froze when he saw the man standing there. David's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Liam," he said simply, stepping beside Naomi. David looked between them. The closeness, the quiet understanding. His jaw tightened. "You moved on." Naomi folded her arms. "I survived." "That's one way to put it," he muttered. Liam's voice stayed calm. "Maybe don't make this harder than it has to be." David turned to him. "You, her new savior." Naomi stepped in. "He's my friend. And he's the reason this bakery still exists. Not because of money, but because he believed when no one else did." David looked down, something like guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't come here to fight." "Then say what you came to say," Naomi said. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I want to be part of Eli's life again." Naomi's breath caught. "After 6 years." "I was sick, Naomi. Mentally, financially. Everything fell apart. But I've been in therapy. I've got a job, a stable home. I'm not the man who left. She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she'd run out of years ago. You don't just show up and rewrite history. I'm not asking for history, he said. Just time. A chance. Liam stayed silent, his hands in his pockets, eyes steady on Naomi. He didn't interfere, didn't save her this time. Just stood beside her. Finally, she said, "You can see him, but it's going to be on my terms." David nodded slowly. That's all I wanted. After he left, Naomi sank onto one of the wooden stools, staring at the door long after it closed. Liam sat beside her quietly. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, barely. "I don't know. He's Eli's father. I can't erase that." "You don't have to," he said. "You just decide how much space he gets now." She looked at him. "You're being very wise for a man who once burned toast in my oven." He smiled. "Pain's a good teacher." She let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, it is." That afternoon, Eli came home. Naomi told him gently that his dad had visited. The boy went quiet, eyes wide. "Do I have to see him?" "Only if you want to," she said softly. Eli thought for a long time. Then, in a small voice, "Can you and Mr. Liam come too?" She nodded, heartbreaking and mending at once. "Of course." That night, after Eli fell asleep, Naomi and Liam sat on the rooftop above the bakery, a blanket around their shoulders. The city lights shimmered below like 1,000 unfinished prayers. She said, "He used to bring me coffee every morning. That's how we met. I used to think love was about showing up with something warm in your hands." Liam looked at her, voice low. "And now I think it's about showing up with empty hands and still staying." He reached over, gently taking her flower-stained fingers in his. "I'm staying," he said quietly. "No matter what name you call it." She looked at their joined hands, messy, real, imperfect, and whispered, "Then maybe that's enough." The wind carried the faint smell of bread from below, mingling with rain and the sound of the sleeping city. It was the smell of something ordinary, something whole, the scent of a life finally rising after so many collapses. And for the first time in years, Naomi didn't look back.